So you hit the wall where and that just means nothing's working, right? Nothing's working. I'm not seeing any movement towards my success, or I'm not seeing God move in these situations, and those are very vulnerable times. Those are soul shaping times, and those are times where we need to continue to be obedient. There's warnings on the other side of that for those who don't.
Hey everybody, before we jump into today's episode, we'd like to recognize all those who make this podcast possible. The Lead Today show is supported by all the generous donors of the Lead Today community. Thank you so much for investing in shaping leaders through this podcast. And be sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you are watching or listening today. All right, let's jump into the podcast.
Everybody, hey, welcome back to the Today Count Show. We are so excited about the success that this podcast is achieving. I guess we measure success because we're up and to the right. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody. We keep growing, and obviously you're telling other people about it. So I truly, truly, truly want to say thank you. And I also appreciate the feedback that you send to us at jim@leadtodaycommunity.com. And as you know, the Today Counts show is produced or sponsored by the Lead Today community. You know that we talk about life, and you know that we talk about leadership. And without apology, we talk about it from a Christian worldview. We're not stuffy. So sometimes our conversations can get pretty wide, up and down, maybe not super straight on theological, because we like to have open conversations with everybody. Today, I'm not sure how long I have known you, Gary, but Dr. Gary Rohrmayer, since probably at least a couple of decades, acquaintances for sure. And you have been, as a profession, in the religious field for sure, but I doubt that you have stayed, painted in that corner as a leadership coach and advisor for more than 3 decades. And you've done some writing, you've done speaking on this topic. And so, first of all, thanks for being on the show, Gary.
Yes, glad to be here, Jim.
Yeah, awesome. So, hey, I brought you on the show for a couple of reasons, but the first and most important is the Lead Today community. We're all about leadership. Our 2 key words is shaping leaders. Our 2 key purpose words: shaping, ing, meaning never ending, and then leaders is the object that we focus on. So we serve leaders, we care about leaders. I was one of those young guys out of the chute as a banker, leading way over my head. I think I've always been over my head. I probably haven't been the most coachable guy either. I've got an entrepreneurial streak in me, and I kind of have to get a bloody nose or 2 before I go, maybe I should get some coaching, some advice here. And I'll give you an example, Gary. This term best practices, every time I hear it, I get this nauseous feeling about me, because I think by the time something becomes a best practice, it may not be a best practice anymore. But that's just my rebellious Jacob nature, maybe. I don't know. I'm on the team, but I'm not on the team. I'm kind of one of those guys. But I want to talk to you about this idea of being a coachable leader. If I could just kind of describe my context, and then maybe you can dive into it from here. I'm going to throw you a
Sure.
big question to start off here in a second. So if I were to draw 3 circles, one encompassing the other, I've got some core, what you'd call retainer clients that I work with. And then outside of that, I've got some really strong entrepreneurial, both in nonprofit work and for-profit work. And then we have a mass, that we reach as well. So, I mean, so that's the simple way it's broken down. And then the podcast is something that we have brought on to scale communication and what have you. And then it usually leads to interviews and speaking engagements, coaching, so forth. One of the things that I did in the beginning is I said yes to everything. I said yes to everything because because I needed to get paid.
Yes, yes.
And fortunately, I've been doing this for long enough now where I don't just say it. We really kind of interview each other in the beginning to see if this is, one of the things. If you called one of my clients and you said, "Hey, what's one of Jim's cliches?" Well, they would say, I'm pretty sure 80, 90% of it would say, well, on the front end, Jim says that he only coaches winners. And I said, because if I don't, and then I lose too, and it tarnishes my brand. But actually, where that comes back around to is this idea of I'm looking for coachable leaders. What have you learned about coachable leaders? What is a coachable leader? At least, start us off.
Yeah, coachable leaders are easier to work with. Let's just say that. Okay, I mean, you can do all the question asking, all the caring, and all the pushing you want. But the fact is that if they're not coachable, they're not going to move in the direction they need to move. Basically, kind of define it as just actually from the biblical concept of, I looked at the book of Proverbs, and I looked just the idea of taking advice, right? And then the biblical injunctions there on that idea of taking advice, and all the good things the scripture says about that if we take advice, we're going to succeed in this world. If we don't take advice, if we're going to struggle, we're going to have there's warnings on the other side of that for those who don't take advice. So that's where I kind of came up with this concept, and basically we kind of define it as this idea of this ability to take advice, in an emotional, healthy way that allows you to succeed, and achieve the goals that you want to achieve, and the life you want to achieve. And so it just kind of it's coming in as a student and a learner, and and processing those things from those angles. There's a lot of humility in it, um, and and the scripture talks a lot about humility, right? And
Yeah, very much so.
yes,
I'm thinking about the opposite of what you just talked about, and I don't remember chapter and verse in Proverbs, but
mhm,
sometimes I want to say that they're on the verses are situated almost like it's two sides of the same door, but to put it into street terms, it says that if you see a fool, you better confront the fool, otherwise the fool will cause you damage. And then it says, uh, don't confront a fool because it never works, and everybody. So basically, what Proverbs says is takes a grenade, throws it, and just says, "Man, hopefully you won't run into a fool." And to be extreme. Coaching itself, though, is in sports, it's a great term. Everybody looks at leadership through the lenses of coaching division, college sports, professional sports, and we're all amazed how one man or one woman has a track record of just creating winning teams. They'll have bad years, of course, but they'll sustain it. But yet in the outside of the athletic world, coaching still kind of has this I'm not sure what to call it, and it almost makes me. In fact, if you go to my LinkedIn page, it doesn't use the word coach because once I was able to articulate my love for leaders and really trying to help leaders and feeling what leaders go through, I found that this coaching term has kind of been cheapened, if you will, and
sure,
this is going to sound a little prideful, but let's see what you think about it.
okay,
I I run into coaches who have never done anything. They've never accomplished anything, but they went to this certification process and they're hanging up this certificate in their office, and now all of a sudden, they can coach. Many of them don't know anything about financial statements. They don't know They've never really been in a fire. They've never even fired anybody. And so do you find that the public is becoming more open to coaching, and if so, how do we differentiate between? I mean, how do you find a good coach? First of all, if I could ask
Yeah,
you that.
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, someone asked me that the other day, and I actually came up with a couple thoughts, because it made me really think about that. Well, how do you find a good coach? When you're looking for a coach, you got to, number one, ask yourself. You got to kind of look inward first, and you got to say, what do I what why am I hiring this coach, and what are my needs, and what are the goals I want to achieve? So you need to have a clear direction where you're going. A good coach will ask you good questions. One of the good questions I ask all the time is, what do you want to accomplish in this relationship in the next 12 months? What do you want to achieve? And so hopefully the coachee has, that idea in mind. And so, and then the second one is, you need to research coaches. Look, just do some research on potential coaches. The best way to find good coaches, especially in your field, would be to seek recommendations from trusted friends, people who've experienced them, they've worked with them already. I would do that first before looking at credentials or any certificate. And certifications are important, but I also think the success is important, as you were stating, basically. And people who've been in the arena, I've worked with a lot of church planters and pastors, and church planters can be, they're edgy entrepreneurial guys, and they want to know that you've been successful at what you did, and that you've actually started a church and it's up and running and going. So look for their success. Research their mentors. Who mentored them? Who coached them? Who was their coach? Who is their active coach today? Right? Then again, look for testimonials and of that nature. And then you want to kind of look for the stylistic or relational alignment. Do you count this person as trustworthy? Right? Just in your first meeting with them, right? Do they feel like a trustworthy person? Do they share your values, your worldview? Is there relational chemistry, right? Does their experience and expertise fit what you need at this moment in your life? And and then there's things, we do this all the time. We do like free 30-minute coaching experiences, and we've learned how to do that and do it well, and basically kind of help somebody solve a problem or navigate an issue within 30 minutes and help them achieve some strategic goals or objectives. And then you can move on. If you're still not sure about it, you can move on to a 3-month trial period, and where you're doing the coaching. And so the one thing we need to really understand, but there's a difference between coaching and mentoring.
Yes.
The mentors in my life, and I have lots of mentors, right?
Yeah, me too.
But I have a few coaches that I work with, right? And the mentors say, Gary, I'm available to you. Call me if you need any help, right? Call me if you're stuck on something. And whereas the coach is going to say, hey, I'm going to help you in this next 12 months achieve these goals you want to achieve. I'm going to take ownership in it just as much as you are, and I'm going to make sure we meet, that we're connecting, whether it's every other week or monthly, whatever that is. And I'm going to check in on you during the week, So, I'm texting one of my guys now because I want to make sure that he followed through on something that he said he was going to do this week. I said, I'm going to send you a text next week, to follow up, to make sure you did what we agreed agreed that you would do this week. So,
what do you, Gary, what do you find? Yeah. What do you find as, uh, whether they're bad habits or whether they're character flaws or insecurities? What do you think in your experience, a lot of leaders have to overcome to become a coachable leader?
Part of it is overcoming themselves, right? Their their own nature, their own perception of themselves. Someone asked me, Gary, someone asked me the other day, said, Gary, what have good coaches done for you? I said, they've saved me from myself.
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah.
You know, they've saved me from myself because, in and of ourselves, we're flawed human beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to make bad decisions. And we need to be willing to humbly submit to others and ask for advice. Right. And I think that's a critical piece. There's some people just are saying, I know the way I want to do it, and this is the way I want to do it. And the only thing that's going to make them coachable is experiencing enough pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the great leaders, if you look at through scripture, the great leaders, the people, leaders I've known, they've all been what we call coachable leaders. And part of that is and we talk about this issue of spiritual authority, right? And as a concept, as a principle that as leaders, God trusts us with some spiritual authority. God delegates that authority to us. It's different than the gift of the Holy Spirit and all that, but there's a profound spiritual concept to understanding coachability, and one of them is this concept of spiritual authority. And when we allow the authority of Christ to dominate our lives, ultimately, every great leader must be a strong follower because we're following the commander in chief, Jesus himself. And so spiritual authority is the source of true credibility in leadership. And it makes our leadership legitimate because it's something that is God-given, God delegated, and people see it and people follow you. And part of it is it's a direct result of God doing a greater work in the deeper areas of the leader's life, so that they can act with courage and faith and conviction in the face of great challenges and also great opportunities. And so that's a real important one. And we talk about spiritual authority is not something that leaders seek, because leaders seek to know God, right? We don't seek authority. If we're going to seek authority, then we're in trouble,
Right.
Spiritual authority is not delegated by humans. It's God empowers leaders with His authority. You probably remember Bobby Clinton's book, The Making of a Leader.
I talk about it all the time. Yeah.
That book shaped my soul, and he says spiritual authority is delegated by God. And it's not something that we can have authority in areas of expertise. We can have authority, positional authority, but it's not till we experience God's spiritual authority that we're going to see things, see the world shaped in a different way. Spiritual authority is exercised by obedient faith. Rebellion cripples the delegation of God's authority, right? Spiritual authority is something that is expanded through submission and humility and obedient faith. God's love language is obedience. And so that's really dynamic. Spiritual authority always brings glory to God, and it benefits those under its care. And spiritual authority starts in the family and moves out from there. To me, I work with leaders, that and really talk about that issue. How are you responding to authority in your life? And because it will really reflect on how you handle the authority God gives you. So.
Yeah, it's good. You reminded me of a lot of things in my youth, right? I think about that acronym. I think that's the right term. You remember FAT, F-A-T.
Yep.
I remember
right.
I remember when I was working with high school students, and I think it was Dr. Dan Spader went to one of his leadership conferences, and he was genius at simplifying, concepts. And if for those listening, if you haven't heard FAT, it sounds kind of funny, but it stands for faithful, available, teachable. And to me, it was always like, that whole idea is you're a leader in making, a leader in action. You will catch them being fat, faithful, available, and teachable. One of the things that I have seen, and I've been guilty of it in my own life, Gary, because if we still use these terminologies, I'm kind of a type A guy now. I'm 65 now, so I've learned a lot. And if I'm not type A in my physical behavior, I'm still type A in the head. And using Stephen Covey's terminology, I don't know if it was the 4 quadrants were original with him or not, but he certainly made them popular if they were not original with him. And I think one of the things that I have found in leaders, whether I'm talking about engaged leaders, I'm not talking about lazy leaders that are positional leaders, that I probably wouldn't coach anyway, but leaders who are really trying to win, leaders that are trying. There isn't a day that goes by. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there's very few work days that go by that I'm not in a conversation with a leader who's either burnt out, or he or she has run into some fork in the roads that normally they'd be able to handle, but it seems like everything's too heavy now, and they get confused, and they've been living in quadrant 1. The majority of their time has been living in quadrant 1, where everything's urgent, everything's important, to where that has actually become a fact. It's not a fact that everything is important and everything is urgent, but to them, as we say, feelings are facts, and all of their feelings are saying that their life is just out of control. So I'm kind of teeing off from the comment you made where you said you're texting a client even now, trying to hold them accountable to something that they asked you to hold them accountable for to get done. And one of the symptoms I begin to see when somebody's in quadrant 1 is they're just scattered, and they don't get things done. And probably more important than that is they cannot seem to differentiate from what needs to get done versus what they do. When they get tired, they tend to do what they're good at. They tend to do what's easy. They don't necessarily commit themselves to the project that's going to take 40 swings at, because that just seems overwhelming. So they don't even start. Or they won't take on a conflict, a hard conversation that they need to have, because they're wiped out. In your coaching, do you how often do you run across leaders like this, and how do you help them untangle themselves, and how many of them don't come out of it?
There's always circumstances and things that happen in people's lives and choices they make that set them on a different path. Our goal is always, when I was working with pastors and church planters, the goal was we want every church plant to succeed. Yet we knew that it's a risky business. When I started planting churches, it was, I think, about the average success rate was about 20% make it. And which was actually better than starting businesses, because it was about 10% of the startups make it. And but over time, and really part of the process is when we started intentionally coaching church planters, we saw the success rate go up. And back then we were kind of it was like a matchmaker. Someone would say, well, Gary, you're going to be his coach, and we didn't know anybody, knew anybody. And so it was really kind of cold turkey. And so part of that is I had to build trust. And I remember one time I had a guy that was he was just resistant. He was like, I'm doing this because, they told me, the organization said I had to have to do it. Well, you know, and I remember I just kept loving him and asking him questions and showing up and being there and affirming him, and then I just remember we had a breakthrough moment. It changed like that, and we were comrades, and we were locked arms, and and he planted a successful church that's going today, and so those are some of the things. So part of it is just got to help them work through it, right? Um, I remember I had a church planter I was working with, and we were in a coaching time, and he was just fixated about these two couples that left his church, right? And he was he couldn't we just couldn't get out of that to talk about anything else, right? So I just kept asking him questions, and praying, Lord, give me a good question to ask, and I mean, that's the key thing of coaching. It's asking good questions, right? And as pastors, we collect illustrations. As coaches, you need to collect questions, right? And so I just kept praying, and in the midst of this, and he was just like locked in on this, and I said, I just was direct about it and said, man, we're just not moving past this, and you've been a pastor for years. You've had people leave your church, I mean, we all know that pain and stuff like that. And I said, why is this one bothering you so much? And that was kind of the question. Why is this one bothering you so much? And he thought about it, and he said, well, I guess it's because my best friend left the church.
Oh.
So all of a sudden I was like engaged with him.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm right there with them.
Those are feelings of betrayal. That's even a bigger deal.
Yep.
I had an elder. This is back in the California days. And again, I was pastoring a large church. I was over my head. And it's a long story, but I basically inherited, the position. And I had an elder who kind of started rubbing up closely to me, and he was kind of an engineering type of mind, and like I said before, I'm more of a innovative kind of person, and so the engineer to me kind of slows me down. But that's exactly what I needed, because he said two things that I continue to share with people today, whether they're pastors or not, because the principles, apply. One of the things, that he said is that, people that go to your church, they're slugging it out every day, and you have no idea of all the different things that they bring into church. So if you ever wondered what you should be doing during the week, he says, man, do your very best to bring your best, every Sunday. That's one thing he told me, which because really helped, because as a young leader, I was insecure and I thought I had to do this, that, so I was like all over the place. Kind of goes back to the quadrant 1, quadrant 2, conversation.
Hey everyone, we're going to take a brief break from the podcast to let you know our very own Jim Piper has released a brand new book called Story, The Art of Learning from Your Past. Everyone has a past, but not everyone learns from it. Jim unpacks lessons in this book that help leaders and learners understand the potential our past has to impact our present and our future. Be sure to grab your copy of Story where books are sold. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
The second thing he said, though, was a mindset similar to this pastor that you were coaching, who someone left. Attendance is an emotional thing for most, I'm just going to say it, winning pastors. I know that's going to offend many. But
yes.
if you don't got some ego, I don't know. I mean, anyway.
Right.
And he could tell that sometimes my effectiveness
Mm.
behind that podium, that pulpit, was my mood, my energy, my attention to detail was dictated
Mm.
by the number of people that was there. So the second thing that he said to me is he said, Jim, he said, focus on who's here, not
Mm.
on who isn't here. But
That's good.
it's almost like he could read my mind, right? And
Yeah.
that's going to lead me to another question for you. I want to see if this has been your experience too. As a coach, they the coaching profession, they have various methods, that they teach you. And I have found that really got to know my client, and I've got to make sure that this idea of a coachable leader, I'm not projecting everything on this person as what
Mhm.
is coachable and what's not coachable, because everybody's so complex, and so different. I mean, they got their temperament, then they got their conditioning, all the good, bad, and ugly that's happened in their life, and most importantly, what they did with it. And the top of that iceberg is their character. It seems as though I have to have a pretty good mix of an inductive approach, to your point, asking the
Mhm.
questions, and I shouldn't be deductive heavy, but some things are quadrant one, and if they don't see it that way, I have sometimes felt, man, I got to lay this one out, and I just got to say, boom, here's what I think you should strongly consider, not just a half a step away from telling them what to do, as if I was their boss, and just saying, I struggling. And feedback that I've received on that has been pretty good. I can't say my batting average is 1,000, but have you found that as well, that you're having to kind of, I mean, some are
Yeah.
actually looking for a little stronger
Oh,
direction,
yes.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, and they're looking for, and you know, um, I like to use terms in the sense of, can I encourage you, in this
yeah,
direction, right?
yeah,
And um, as I kind of look at this, it's more directive. I mean, especially when you're coaching people, like if we're somebody starting up a business or starting a church or a ministry, there are things that need to be done. And so you're a little more, um, you know, um, focused and directive, in that coaching style, especially when there's a timeline on it, right? Um, and I think that's, part of it is, again, why are you pursuing coaching? What do you want to achieve in your coaching, in your coaching relationship? And I find people want to be held accountable, but you just have to do it again in a nice way, right? It's just, they're, and they're ultimately they're paying you to coach them, to help them achieve this goal. One of the guys I coached wrote a book, and then he wrote that book that year. He achieved that goal. That was one of the things that he wanted to see achieved. And so, that, I lift up that, he lifted up that book as a trophy, and I lift up as a trophy too, that we I helped him,
as a partnership, yeah,
right. And
yeah,
so, that's part of it. Whereas, if in a mentoring relationship, it's like, well, I'll just give you advice when you need it,
right.
right? And so, um, uh, and mentoring has a great role and is an important role in people's lives, but it's very different than coaching.
Yeah, for leaders listening to this podcast with Dr. Gary Rohrmayer, here's an important context that I'm going to throw out, and then I'm going to let Gary commentate on it. I'll let him. I'm going to give you the play-by-play, and he'll give you the color here and commentate it, because I know he can do this. Whether you have a coach or you are the coach, and I think what Gary and I are saying is that both should probably be true for us. We should be probably, whether it's formal or not, we should be coaching folks, and we should be receiving, coaching from others. But the context for effective accountability, I have found, is ownership. If you agree to be held accountable, but you don't really own what it is that you're trying to do, and then I really don't know what's going on there. So you really got to get down into your soul and say, do I own this, whatever this is? If you own it, and then I think you'll be open to accountability, and that is when accountability becomes effective. What do you say about that, Gary?
Well, yes. I mean, and again, that's goes back to the whole reason of looking for a coach is that I want to be accountable. This what I want to achieve is important to me, and I'm willing to pay someone to help me achieve that, and that's really important. And but we all get stuck sometimes, right? And I remember, you know, when one guy was coaching years ago, and in pastoral terms, you get the call and you hit the wall, right?
It's
And
been a while since I've heard that. Yeah.
yeah, so um, so you hit the wall where and that just means nothing's working, right? Nothing's working. I'm not seeing any movement towards my success, or I'm not seeing God move in these situations, and those are very vulnerable times, and those are the times that you know Bobby Clinton would talk about is those are soul shaping times, and those are times where we need to continue to be obedient to the call, even when we're hitting this wall of resistance, or um, and I've seen helped pastors through that many times, and part of it is just to help them say, this is a normal process you're going through. This is normal. It's okay, and giving them permission to kind of breathe in.
Yeah, that's big, Gary, right there. I think if I can just interrupt you there, that I 100% high five agree with you on that statement. If you haven't been through it, whatever it is, and you have somebody who's experienced, who's been there, they can look at you with sincerity and say, "This is normal. This is par for the course."
Right.
That really does add an invaluable something, right? I don't even know what the word is, but it calms them down. They get into more of an acceptance mode, not acceptance like give up, but okay, all right. And
Mm-hmm.
it really helps with their insecurities, other things, like that.
Yeah.
That's a powerful word right there.
Well, and give you a quick example. I was talking to a leader, and he was struggling over his numbers, right?
yeah,
And we're kind of going back to what you said. And numbers count; they matter. And he was just struggling about the kind of the wins and losses, and he goes, and he's like, man, we're doing great, but man, it just bothers me, these losses we get, and he was just kind of asking the question, why does this bother me so much? It's just, I mean, I'm just wrapped up in it, and I looked at him and I said, it's because you care.
yes,
You care. This is important to you. You
yes,
want to achieve this. You believe that God's called you to achieve this goal, whatever it is, right? And the problem is, there'd be a bigger problem if you didn't care.
yep, yep. That's so good.
And
That
I remember talking to a pastor one day, and his church was dwindling, and um, it was just a simple thing of you needed a worship leader, right? And I said, do you have a worship leader for Sunday? No, we're just going to do tape music. I'm like, you know what a downer that is? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. That's waving the white flag.
yes, yeah. And I told him, I said, I gave you a lead on, 5 different, people you could call, and you haven't done anything with it. I said, I'm telling you, if I knew I didn't have a worship leader, it was Monday and I didn't have one scheduled for Sunday, I have a stomach ache all week.
You know, I mean,
You know,
and I
and
think,
that kind of motivates you to move into action, right? And so, yeah.
yeah, I think that's where sometimes spiritual people live in the clouds. You know,
Mhm.
they somehow unplug to humanity. You know, when I see that somebody is anxious about something, I don't run and say, "Oh my gosh, look how immature they are." Instead, I'm going, "Well, man, something that they care about isn't going right in their eyes." And so I first try to align with, man, what's rocking in your world. Because if you don't care about it, it's not gonna bother you. But if you're messed up, jacked up, sideways, then there's some, you know, you've been T-boned with something. And which kind of leads me to, again, I don't know about you, but you know, the reason why I think teachable leaders really need to have a coach is because, have I always thought about things the right way? The answer is a clear no. It's an absolute clear no. You know, when I graduate from my board of directors, me, myself, and I, and actually add some other people in onto that board, it is amazing the different perspectives that I get. In fact, I'm sitting in a studio right now that only came about because I had a board member who was thinking bigger than me and who pushed me. I don't normally need a push. Normally, I need to get tackled from behind, but 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 I have somebody on my board who occasionally I have to go, man, I got to get hustling, so I think that's another part of it too. I think that coaching, and I don't know if this has been your experience too. I kind of feel that I have a great advantage in all the years that I've been the title that my clients have given me is friend and advisor
Mm.
to leaders, and I've embraced that with a lot of affection. You know, because I came out with the standard deal in the beginning, but like I told you, I said yes to everything.
Yeah.
and we all have a good time laughing at that too, because
Right.
entrepreneurs, you know, they find themselves in that same situation. And you know, it's something that we can all chuckle. Speaking of church planting, I think it was Bob Logan in the Church Planners Toolkit that I went through at International School of Theology
Yeah.
a long, long time ago. And I don't know how they came up with the 87%, Gary. I don't know how they came up with that, but there are certain things that stick in my mind that has come from coaching. I already gave you a couple of examples,
Sure.
but here's another one. That 87%, 87%. Again, I don't know how
Mm.
scientific that number was, but somebody had enough boldness to write it and
Mhm.
to do a research in their DMin paper or something. I don't know what,
Right.
but the junk you're living with today,
Mm.
87% of that is can be found originated in your conception phase.
Mm.
And I thought, man, that is just so darn true.
Wow.
And so, especially if you are starting something new, if you are moving into a new location, are you trying to, as another one of my friends, John Chastain, says, a re-leader? You know, you are taking on someone else's mess, and now you're trying to regenerate, renew, you know, what
Mm.
have you. Just so important to think about the conception phase, you know, working on your business, not just in it, as we say. But reframing is the word that I wanted to throw out. I think that I know I have a good coach, and I know that I'm becoming more coachable when I allow myself to sit in community where reframing on how I'm thinking about something actually happens. Sometimes that community brings affirming ideas that, okay, I'm thinking about this pretty well. But other times I'm going, wow, man, I was 30 degrees off here. And that doesn't take too long to become a real problem. I'm sure you find reframing is a big part of what you do as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're just helping people, right? Kind of get a fresh perspective on
Yeah.
their situation, and that's, good coaches help you, right? And that's where, they help you find encouragement in times of despair, right? They help you push through quitting points, and
And that's
and
exciting, right? That's
yeah,
exciting to receive that.
right.
I had a client a few weeks ago text me about something, and I read it. He did one of those fatal 360s, and I said, which really brings out the coward in a lot of people, and the
Sure.
systemic goo in a culture. And I'm not completely done with 360s, but I think there's a better way. That's my own Jimisms.
Hmm.
But I read what he sent me, and I said to him, "This just isn't fair." And he knows me well enough to know that I don't mince my words. And he goes, "Wow." And this was right before he's going on vacation, weekend vacation. And he said, "Jim, if I didn't have those words, I would have been stewing on that all the time, at the beach."
Hmm.
Hey, Gary, before I let you go, you have written a book. And if I wrote down the title correctly, it's 10 Marks of a Coachable Leader. 10 Marks of a Coachable Leader.
Yep.
We have a pretty broad audience. And one thing I tell the audience all the time is be a reader, be a reader, be a reader.
Hmm.
Where can we get our hands on this book, 10 Marks of a Coachable Leader? And before you answer that question,
Yep.
what else do you want us to know? I mean, the title sounds pretty clear. What
Yeah.
else do we need to know about that book?
You can get it. It's available on kind of all the outlets out there, Amazon, all that. You can get it cheaper at my website, GaryRohrmayer.com.
Okay,
And
we'll get that in the show notes.
yep, GaryRohrmayer.com.
Okay.
Uh, and then it really came out of, uh, I had our church, I was really aggressive in discipleship and one-on-one discipleship, and it kind of just grew out of that. And then I started coaching pastors and church planters, and so this whole kind of just grew out of that, and being coachable and studying it, and asking myself, am I coachable? Right. And so, and when you look at the successful leaders in scripture, right, Apollos is one of those. I think, like just the example of him. He was a great, learned, wise man, and yet he was brought under the wing of Priscilla and Aquila, and they invited him and said, we need to help you learn a few things a little more accurately. And so, and he went on to be a great leader. And so that whole concept, but yeah, and it just, these are just 10 marks that I've seen in my coaching relationships. It's a quick read. It's a power packed book. One guy said it was like I got punched in the face, I mean, and
That's awesome. I
and but
love that. As an
yeah,
ex-wrestler, I
yeah,
recognize with that.
yes, and then
I resonate, I mean, yeah.
yeah. Well, I wanted to make it short, powerful, to the point, and initially I wrote it years ago, and I gave it to my clients, my coaching clients, and so
Yes.
now we're just kind of broadening it out, and I use it in our coaching ministry we have now today, and make sure everybody reads that. Every staff member I've ever hired, they've all had to read this, because I said, this is the way, I'm going to relate to you, as a coach, right? And but it just kind of walks through those what we call those 10 marks from a very strong Christian perspective, a lot of biblical injunctions in
Oh, we
there,
need that.
and
We need that in the workplace.
yep,
All of my clients know, our foundation and who we are. Hey, a couple quick things though
yep,
before you go, just on the side.
okay,
It's kind of fun. I love the title of your book, 10 Marks of a Coachable Leader, because it's like in your face. And I like that because I always wrestled better when the match started off where I could tell this guy was serious. it would get it would get me on my toes, and I go, "Uh-oh, I'm
yep,
in for a battle here." It gets you on your toes. So I like that. But you've been in Chicago for a number of years, and
yep,
I need your help to tell me to tell the story. But I
okay,
flew in really late, and I don't remember what side of town I was in. I don't remember any of that. I mean, Chicago is massive, and I was going to a function in our denomination, but I was by myself for some reason. I don't know why. in the rental car, and I was starving to death.
Oh,
And so I'm driving down this dark street. Chicago has they're beef sandwiches, but
yes, yes,
is that what they're called? Beef sandwiches? Or
yes, yes. Italian beefs.
Italian beef, and they're not beef dips. They're not, they're not those kinds that I'd be used to in California or whatever. And I walked in right when they were closing. They said, "Sorry, sir, we're closed." And I said, "Guys," and I could be pretty theatrical. I go, "Guys, I'm going to die here." And they go, they go, "Well, actually, we've got enough to make, one." And yes, of course, I was starving to death. So everything does. But I inhaled that. That was amazing. That was amazing. So the next day for lunch, I remember, we had the old horrible hotel lunch, that was being served. So I grabbed a few guys and we split, and we went back to that same place
There you go.
for lunch. We were 30 minutes late for the next session, but people were used to that with me. Anyway,
Yes, yeah,
Dr. Gary Rohrmayer, thank you for your time, and I hope that your book, the 10 Marks of a Coachable Leader, I think I'll order it on your website
great.
for my library, and of course for my own research, that I get better as a leader and as a coach.
Great.
Good seeing you again. God bless you.
Yeah, good seeing you. Thank you, Jim. You do a great job with this podcast. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here at the Today Count Show. Be sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you listen or watch so you don't miss any content. And stay tuned for more coming soon.